What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we've got the TuyaKnife Hive 2. So if you don't know who TuyaKnives is, I didn't until I got this knife in a trade from a buddy. They are a Chinese OEM mostly, so they make knives for knife designers or other companies usually, but this is one of their own offerings. So as you can see, this is a titanium frame lock. It is in M390 and has a Japanese style tanto, so that means it's got more of a belly and a more aggressive angle on that tanto front edge. The design elements on this knife are pretty sweet, actually. I think it's a really unique looking knife, and I think that they kind of went outside of standard. They really kind of went to the beat of their own drum, if you will. It's kind of an overused term, but I really like what they did with it. It's not necessarily my taste, but it is unique and something you don't see every day. So it's called the Hive, and I think that's basically just because of this kind of honeycomb style design with the carbon fiber inlays, which those aren't technically inlays, but we will get to that in a minute here. And kind of a consistent design language throughout. It's a pretty solid little knife, though it is not little. So let's do a couple size comparisons. I'll start with my standard size comparisons, which are the Paramilitary 2 and the Paramilitary 3. As you can see, it is a pretty significantly sized knife. It's definitely full size. It's a 3 3/4 inch blade. Dwarfs both of those knives. Grabbed a couple other size comparisons just because that's fun. I've got a CRK Sabenza 31, large Sabenza 31, pretty close in size to that, butt to tip, and a Strider snub-nose Tonto. So yeah, it is definitely a full-size knife. It has a flipper tab, obviously. It runs on bearings, just kind of standard caged bearings, and also has this fuller, which can be used to deploy it if you kind of shift way down on the knife. Yeah, pretty standard details about the knife, but it is a unique design. There's something I need to talk about with this knife, though. So first of all, let's talk about the price point. $258. I think you can buy it right now on their website. Blade HQ offered them. And on the surface, it's really well finished. This knife looks really nice, and the centering is solid. I love when there's not a lot of room between the blade and the handles like that. The lockup is good. The action is good now. And yeah, on the surface, it's a pretty solid knife. Like it seems like it'd be a great beater. The quality of the build is a little bit suspect. I don't know if suspect might be the wrong word, but it seems pricey for what it is. I mean, you're getting a solid piece of titanium, a big chunk of M390, so there are premium-ish materials in this knife, but I took it apart when I got it because the detent was super loose. It was you could shake it open really easily. I tightened that up by bending the lock bar. If you don't know how to tighten a detent, look up videos on it. Actually, Neves Knives has a really good video, but it also, I don't recommend doing that unless you're really comfortable, because you can end up screwing up a knife. That being said, when I went to bend this titanium lock bar to give it a little more tension on the lock bar, it bent very easily, leading me to be a little bit concerned about the quality of titanium used. Usually when you have to tighten a detent, it takes a lot more force than you expect it to, and you're afraid doing it. So when I took this apart to adjust the detent, I went to do that, and it bent a little bit suspectly easily. Now, I do believe this is titanium. It is not magnetic, so I don't think they would lie about that, but I think it's a really pretty low quality titanium. The other thing that made me suspect about this build quality is these inlays. So I saw this design initially and was like, wow, that's really cool. And, traditionally speaking, inlays are a milling pattern cut out of a knife and then epoxied in, or some sort of attaching mechanism in. Sometimes you will find them pinned in, which is pretty cool. Clyde Challoner does that. I don't have one of his knives with me right now. I have a Viper, which I have a video about, which you can check out. I'll put a link here. But that knife, the inlays are pinned in, and then this one, there's milling into the top of the handle, and then they're epoxied in. Now this knife, I assumed was the same, but actually the way that these patterns are done is that each one of these holes that has carbon fiber is drilled all the way through, and then on the inside they glued a piece of carbon fiber. I don't know if we can show that very easily. I got my light here. Okay, you can see that there. So it's glued in. When I had the knife apart, the gluing for that wasn't super consistent across the whole piece, which, makes me a little bit nervous for the durability of these carbon fiber inlays, because I would bet money that if I took something like a pen and pushed in on these, that would pop out. So it's one of those things that it's kind of surface level. This knife looks really solid, but there are some details like that I noticed, like the kind of low grade titanium, that glued in carbon fiber piece, not true inlays. And then the final piece that made me suspect is, can you hear that? I'll bring it to the microphone. Knife rattles, and so what that is there's some dowels, just some standard size cut dowels that act as pins to hold this backspacer in. It's it's just those little attention to detail things that make it a little bit less than ideal, right? Again, this is not a super expensive knife. Well, actually, you know what? It's $260. Relative to some of the knives I have, that is not super expensive. But in the grand scheme of knives, that is expensive, right? If you look at a Paramilitary 2, there's no rattling on this. The steel quality is the same, and the build quality, honestly, I think is better. Again, you could argue that you're getting a titanium frame lock and something unique design. And, I agree with you. That's a cool design. But there's some lacking things here. I think that there are better Chinese companies out there that are doing less suspect build quality. The other thing that I noticed when I had this apart was this captured piece here. I almost think that this cap is plastic. It might not be. It might be a coated aluminum or something. That was really light. The hardware is poor quality. I use the proper tools, and you can see it's kind of marred up already, but I was careful. It's one of those things where it's a $260 knife. That's not expensive in the grand scheme of knives, but in the Chinese knife world, that is kind of expensive, considering that there are companies out there like Best Tech who are doing pretty flawless quality things. It's just something that I noticed when I was looking through this, because the argument always arises of what's the point of buying something expensive in the knife world, right? Like, how is this any better than this, right? Or how is this any worse than this, especially when this costs twice this? I mean, this truly, when handling these two, this is at least double the quality. This feels solid. This feels surface level. It looks great. You get it apart and you start to question those things. And not even obviously just the Sebenza, but also something like this, a Strider SNG, this doesn't feel flimsy in any way, and this does have that flimsiness because of those things that I brought up. And then like most notably would be like a Strider, or excuse me, I already showed the Strider, a Shiro F95. And I say most notably because they're, identical size, both titanium frame locks. Shiro often uses M390. Like, what's the difference in quality here? Like, people would argue, oh, well, if I could have this, why would I buy a Shiro? I mean, you get these two in your hand, and the attention to detail, which is something I talk about, and the actual build quality is night and day. This is essentially perfect. Again, this is a $700 knife. So $280 or $700, it's the argument of like, what are you willing to spend? But even in the $280 range, I probably would go for something else. I would go for the Spyderco, or one of the other Chinese companies that's doing something in this range that you can definitely get that's value. So I don't know. I like the design. I think it's a pretty cool looking knife. I love some details about it. They got the external fit and finish really good, but there's like some disconcerting things like that rattle, the longevity of the inlays, because they're not truly inlays, the quality of the titanium. It's just some of those things that you're like, I'd rather pay a little more and have something better, or just buy a different company. So with that, I guess I'm just doing negative videos lately. This is my little notepad with ratings. So let's get into the ratings. Carryability, 5. It was fine. It's fine to carry. It's a little bit heavy. The pocket clip is a little bit, the retention's not great. I feel like it doesn't hold the knife super well, and I think that's probably because it needs more rigidity in the pocket clip for a knife this heavy. It's a 5.2 ounce knife, which for all the knives that I just brought out for size comparisons and to talk about, it is heavier than every one of these knives, including the Shiro, which is a little bit bigger. And there is milling on the inside, so it's not like just it's a solid piece of titanium. So it is heavier than all of those. So that's not usually a big deal to me, and whatever. Heavy is over, or like people pay too much attention to that, but this is something to note. So 5.2 ounces, kind of heavy for the size of the knife. Pocket clip isn't great. There's a flipper tab, or great at retention. It's actually, I like how deep this pocket clip is. That was nice. Flipper tab, so it takes up a lot of pocket space. So it's kind of a pocket hog, but not bad. So I gave it a 5, just totally average. Usability, I gave this a 4. So I would say that those, durability concerns that I have affect the usability, for me at least. There would be the question in the back of my mind when using this, like, is something going to have an issue? I don't know. It locks up good. It's a M390, so hypothetically that's quite durable. I haven't used this hardly at all, just a little bit since I've been carrying it, but so it's a question of heat treat on that. But M390 is a good steel, so we'll take that at face value. Good steel. The blade shape, I feel like these really aggressive angled Tontos, you kind of just lose the ability to use the tip, and you kind of get the corner here, but the corner on between the Tonto tip and the actual cutting blade is not sharp enough to really do anything with, as opposed to something like this that has a pretty aggressive tip on it. So Tontos can be useful, but I feel like it's less useful than your average drop point. So overall, I gave it a 4 on usability. And then last, I gave it a 4 on maintainability. So maintainability, a 4 because of the soft hardware, and then M390, or not M390, the blade shape. It is M390, but the blade shape, aggressive Tonto like this is hard to sharpen. It's just one of those things that when you are sharpening aggressive tantas, you have to use, or any tanta, you have to use stones. And, you know, when you're drawing across the stones, you sharpen one edge and then you go to the other edge. And something as aggressive, this is a hard angle to keep consistent because of this flip. So to me, these are harder to maintain, harder to sharpen. And then, you know, my concerns about having it apart, and when I was adjusting it and just had it apart, the dowels being loose and things like that makes me question how maintainable it actually is, and rather if it is more one of those knives that once it, you know, needs some love, it gets retired permanently. You know, these things might be unfounded. I might be too cynical about this, but you can get a lot of knife for $260, and there are some concerns on the kind of the quality, the actual quality of this knife. It feels great in the hand. It is really cool looking, so if that speaks to you, awesome. But after taking it apart and, you know, seeing how kind of pliable that titanium was, and then some of those other things that I brought up, it's just one of those things where I think that you can get a better knife in this price range, because $260, it's cheaper than a lot of my knives, but it's not a cheap knife. There's really good value knives out there that I think are better build quality and probably more durable, or definitely more durable. If you're just going for durable, go for cold steel or whatever. So that's kind of my thoughts on this. It was kind of rambly and kind of negative, but I try to be honest with you guys. If you love your Tuya Hive, great. I'm happy you do. I'm just some guy on the internet. I try not to talk too much shit. I do like this design. It's a good action now that I've adjusted it. They did some things really well, but for the price, I think there's better things out there. Or for for the price, there are better things out there. But also, it's the conversation of, you know, it's in the details. The knives, the details matter on knives, and the quality of the build really matters. And, you know, they say that you can really only tell the quality of something once you take it apart. And this kind of reminds me of like a I don't know, a Mazda RX-8. I don't know if you guys remember those, but they were really cool looking knives. They had a rotary engine, and the engine was shit. It was just one of those things where once you open it up, you're like, oh boy. So this kind of feels like that, with the loose pins on the inside and the glued backside of these inlays, and kind of the cheap hardware. I don't know. It's one of those things that I probably wouldn't recommend. I think there are better things out there for this price range. It's cool looking, but probably not worth it. Anyways, thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here, and I will catch you on the next one.